Good morning to day 2. Thank you all for coming to AAVSO's member meeting. I just have a couple of logistics things that I need to cover. First off, I'd like to issue an apology to the people that were attending online. I understand that we had some technical issues yesterday that caused some of you to miss maybe the first 15 minutes of Brad Schaefer's talk. I'd just like to say that I'm sorry and that we will be posting the video to the whole session that was yesterday. We'll be posting those to YouTube and sending you the links sometime later on today. So thank you for your understanding on that. Next up is tomorrow is Veterans Day. And so I'd just like to see if anybody in the audience is actually a veteran. Could you stand up? I'd just like to thank you for your service. All right. Next up, I'd also like to say a special thanks to Joyce Guzik. Joyce, are you in the audience? Oh, there you are, Joyce. Hey, thank you for coming on in. As you may or may not know, Joyce was the chair of our abstract committee for the 2nd year in a row, maybe 3rd year or longer. 3rd year in a row, yep. And she's also the individual who handles our proceedings. And so that's certainly not a small task by any means. And so Joyce, on behalf of all of us here at AAVSO, thank you for putting together such a wonderful meeting and handling the the rest of the aspects of the meeting as well. Thank you. My last logistical item here is that just like to remind you all that we do have the raffles are still ongoing today. So you'll need to purchase your raffle tickets. The drawing will be tonight during the member meeting. And if you don't write your name on the back of your ticket, you have to be present to win. Okay, all right. With that, I'll go ahead and turn the floor over to Richard to call the meeting to order.
Thank you, Brian. I would like to call the 113th member meeting of the American Astronomical Society. American Association of Variable Star Observers to order. And Lauren, do not hit that with the mic in place. Okay, we have a fairly full agenda. Okay, here's the clicker. We'll find out if it goes the right direction. So the business meeting is sometimes seems like the dullest thing, but in very important ways, it's one of the most important things we do. We're recognizing people who have worked for this organization and made it function. So this will be an extended thank you to all those people who have made AAVSO an effective scientific, astronomical, star-oriented organization.
So as is tradition within the AAVSO, we always like to take a moment at the beginning of the member meeting to honor those who have departed. What I'll do is I'll just show individuals' photos. I'll mention their name and you can read something about their accomplishments and contributions to the organization. And at the end, I'll ask for a moment of silence. John Chalnosky, James Jones, and Richard Kinney. David Lane, Charles McMillan, and Mark O'Connell. John O'Neill, Roger Pickard, and Wim Schmidt. So I ask that we remember our fellow observers in a moment of silence. Thank you very much. So Chris, if you could please do the reading of the minutes. If you would like to, ma'am.
Morning, everyone. So these are the highlights of the AAVSO membership meeting from November 5th, 2023. The meeting was called to order at 9:03 a.m. in person in Somerville, Massachusetts, and online on Zoom by President Dave Kowal. The meeting began with a moment of silence for those we lost this year. Chris Larson gave a summary of the November 6, 2022 membership meeting. Bob Stevens gave an overview of the financials. The draw on the endowment was at about 4.5%. We need to generate more income to get to the target 4% draw. Kathy Spirer explained that the new office is working nicely. The board will be reevaluating our needs. We currently have a 5-year lease. Brian commented that our staff is now 50% remote at this point, and the increased flexibility has allowed us to attract talented individuals. JAAVSO Editor-in-Chief Nancy Morrison noted that there are no page charges for members to publish in our open access journal. We have slightly increased the number of unique authors and referees. The editor is working with authors, especially students, to help bring their work to publication as needed. Every paper has at least one member on it as co-author. President Dave Kowal thanked the current board members for their service. The new board members are Walt Cooney, Mark Munkasey, and Matt Craig. Dave Kowal was thanked for his service as president. Brian reviewed the continued upward trend in membership. Participation in choice courses is down because there were fewer courses offered. Webinars continue to be popular, though there has been a shift from live to asynchronous viewing. AID and VSX continue to grow exponentially. We continue to maintain the world's largest database on variable stars. VSX is responsible for about 1/4 of all our citations in journals. AVSPEC, Exoplanet, and solar databases continue their growth as well. The number of observing campaigns is about half of what it was in the mid-2000s, but there continue to be interesting campaigns created each year. Publications with AAVSO in the full text remains consistent at about 250 peer-reviewed papers per year. Brian introduced members to the Ombuds role. The special email is ombuds@aavso.org. Dennis Conti will be taking over this role as our second VP. Brian then gave his executive director's report. He began with a recap of his first year. His analysis revealed the following concerns: perception that our data quality could be improved, concern that AAVSO is becoming less relevant, that it is too difficult to get started in variable star astronomy, AAVSO's rate of growth is too low, not promoting itself enough, and low collaboration with sister organizations. Actions taken in response include the following: a new data quality task force produced recommendations to be incorporated in the next year or two. We are continuing to enhance our marketing and promotion and seek to collaborate more with sister organizations. The AAS 242 workshop on small telescopes in the era of big surveys was a valuable experience in bringing together individuals with varied backgrounds to discuss opportunities and challenges. Large sky surveys and machine learning pipelines will change what professionals need from us, including a flood of alert notices for follow-up. This year's focus areas include develop guidance for sky survey collaborations, build relationship with ESA Plato and NASA HWO teams, reduce the barrier to getting involved in variable star research, and infrastructure improvements, single sign-on provider, new form software, and website migration. How you can help. Talk about the AAVSO to your local and regional astronomy clubs, coordinate with AAVSO staff on writing articles for popular magazines, volunteer to help our committees, section leaders, and staff, engage with the community, including observing sections, and donate to the AAVSO during the annual campaign. The Observer Awards were presented by Brian Kloppenborg to those present at the meeting in person. Dave Kowal recognized members who had reached 25 years of membership. The William Tyler Olcott Distinguished Service Award was presented to Ken Menzies for his promotion of variable star observing and service to AAVSONet. The Merit Award was presented to George Silvis for outstanding service to variable star astronomy and the AAVSO. The Director's Award was presented to the members of the Data Quality Task Force. Dave recognized the 3 board members who were rotating off: Antonella Noda, Bob Buckheim, and Ken Hudson. And the meeting was adjourned at 10:52 a.m. Respectfully submitted, Chris Larson, Secretary.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. So next up in the agenda is going to be the treasurer's report. Oops. So, Bob Stevens, are you online?
Yes, I am. I see you have already loaded my report. I was going to share it so I can control it.
Okay.
So
right.
there, okay, we got it.
Okay. Oh, just hold on a sec, Bob. Go ahead and switch off the presentation mode. I'll stop sharing my screen. So you're presenting remotely there, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Sorry I couldn't be there with you today. Certainly wanted to be. I know we have a very packed schedule today, so I've been asked to try to keep it short and stay within my lanes and my time frame. So here we go. I'm going to move the pictures out of the way here so I can see. Okay, this is our formally called a statement of financial position. A small business owner might call this a balance sheet. And it's chock full of numbers and everything. So I'm just going to talk about a few of them and highlight a few. The important column is the one in the middle labeled 2024. And this is a list of our assets and liabilities on the end of our fiscal year, which was September 30th, 2024. The column on the right side is merely there for comparative purposes. One of the most important numbers that we would consider is how much cash do we have in the bank? And in this case, we had just a bit over $400,000 at the end of the current year. And a second, even more important number is the amount in our investment portfolio, sometimes called the endowment, improperly speaking a little bit. But at the end of September, it had $18.4 million in it. As you can see, that's almost a $3 million increase from the year before, thanks to a spectacular stock market. A few other numbers to consider. We have a lease, and we have about 2.5 years left on the lease, and this 200,000 is simply the economic value of the remaining portion of that lease. So we can move on. The total of those of that top column is $19 million. That's the total of our assets. Next, we would consider would be monies that we owe to various people. $90,000, that's your accounts payable, your credit card payable, that's accrued vacation time owed to the employees. That's, things like that is in that number. The $81,000 deferred revenue, that's the registrations received for the meeting that you're sitting in right now, which occurred in the next fiscal year. We also have deferred membership dues. That's dues that are paid for the next fiscal year, comprise that number. And then finally, the difference between assets and liabilities are called your net assets, logically speaking. And net assets are broken down in two categories: those that come with donor restrictions and those that have no donor restrictions. Well, the donor restrictions are about $3.6 million, and the lion's share of that was some original endowments provided, which just means that it's corpus, that it can't be spent down. Okay, the next item that we're going to look at is formally called the statement of activities. A small business owner would call it a profit and loss statement or an income statement or something like that. Those terms are all fairly synonymous with each other. And you can see just a whole bunch of very confusing numbers up here. But again, the ones that we want to pay attention to are the ones labeled in the 2024 column. 2023 is just there for comparative purposes again. And then we're going to split out all the columns to the left is just detail coming up to the 2024 column. And so that detail is provided here. This is broken out because it gets reported this way on tax returns and audited financial statements, because donors are very interested in knowing what's being spent on your programs versus general administrative versus fundraising expenses. And then you also have a few donor restricted expenses involved there also. That's this section here in the middle in red. And as a board, we have separated what's going on in our investment portfolio, also known as the endowment funds. And so the money that was retained in there and not used in operations, we can see that it grew by $3 million. And that again is the growth of the stock market. We took a little bit out to use in operations and the rest of it left there. Now in normal years, that's going to be much, much closer to zero. In a few years, that can sometimes go negative, but generally speaking, there's going to be, a few $100,000 in there typically. Up here in the revenues, the other revenues that we use and live upon to run the organization is this section up here in red. We got the operating income, we got the portion that we choose to take out of the endowment funds or the investment portfolio, which is typically we're trying to get down to 4% consistently, but we've been in the 4 to 4.5% in recent years, and then some other stuff, some grants and things like that. Because it's so hard to visualize just by looking at the raw data, so to speak, I like to produce this pie chart, which shows the lion's share of what we use to run the organization, the 4 to 4.5% draw from the investment portfolio, is 2/3 of the total revenues that we live upon. The dues from the members is about 10%. We have some contributions mostly through the annual campaign, about 15%. This meeting typically returns just a few tens of thousands of dollars in registration fees. And then we got some other income, which is some other grants and things like that. The expenses down below, again, categorized by programs, G&A, and fundraising, numbers that are directly traceable to the tax returns and audited financial statements, are also hard to visualize. So I'm going to break it out here. As expected, as typical, and as you would want to see, the lion's share of the money is spent on personnel for various reasons. That personnel then charges all of their time to various programs and other events going on. But that's, again, almost 2/3 of everything we spend is on personnel. We have some contract services, the auditors, the attorneys, and some other things are involved in there. Internet costs is about 4% of everything that we do. This meeting, this is last year's meeting, actually in Boston, cost $87,000. And that's just the direct hard costs. That's not the personnel cost portion of it to organize and run the meeting. And you compared that back to the $30,000, you know that that meeting in total lost $80,000. We got some operating expenses, the cost of running the office and everything, and insurance and a whole bunch of other things is 14%, and then a couple of other small portions of the pie. So that's the big picture of the lion's share, and I got time for a question or two. I've got, looks like 2 or 3 minutes left in my section of the schedule. So if there's a quick question that we take from the audience or online, I can answer that. Otherwise, you can contact me directly.
So if there's any questions, please feel free to come on up to the microphones at the front of the room. Elizabeth, you have an online one?
I have an online question from Richard Glassner. What would the investment fund asset mix need to get to stocks versus fixed income? Let me start over again.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, from Richard Glassner. What would the investment fund asset mix need to get to stocks versus fixed income in order to have the fund yield 4%? Thank you.
Okay. His question really is, what is our current mix? It's 70-30, and that's the mix that we've been using for years and years and years. And what would it have to be in order to produce enough for a 4% draw? It's a complex question. First of all, our investment portfolio is designed to try to track the U.S. economy as a whole, just generally speaking, the S&P 500, let's just say that. And the S&P 500 in recent years has returned 10%, but nobody can count on doing that in the future. So what's the safe position? We've been told by our investment advisors to use a 6.5% rate of return on our portfolio in order to guarantee our needs. And that roughly can be broken down to inflation of 2.5%, leaving the 4%. So 6.5 less 2.5 equals 4%. So if the market returns what is done in recent years, we have no problems whatsoever But we know eventually there's going to be a hiccup. There's going to be a downturn. It's going to last probably 18 months, which is very typical. And so for that reason, we have also tried to keep 18 months of expenses in liquid assets so that when that day comes, we don't know when, but it will come, we know, we do not have to sell part of the portfolio in a down market. That's the real brief thumbnail. It gets very much more complicated from there. A lot of nonprofits are in a 60-40 mix, which most people consider to be too conservative these days because fixed return assets have been down for decades now.
Okay, and then Elizabeth
It's a
has
yes, no.
another online question.
I think this is just a yes, no, Bob. From Ray Tomlin, does internet cover the databases and VFOAT and the website?
Short answer, yes. Brian can expand on that in his presentations later if needed.
Yeah, I probably won't be talking about it any further, but Ray, it was from Ray, right, Elizabeth? If you have that question, feel free to go ahead and ask it a little bit later. It's basically split. I think the total was about $30,000, right, Bob? And it's kind of
it's higher than that, but yes.
okay. Yeah, so I'm remembering last year's numbers, and they're basically split in thirds. A third for actually running and operating the active website, a third for backups, and a third actually for VFOAT itself. So it's a relatively expensive application for us to run in the cloud.
Okay. Well, surprisingly, I brought it in on time. That's especially surprising for me because I tend to drone on and on. So I'll pass the torch back to Brian.
Okay, thank you, Bob. All right, next up is the JAAVSO editor report. Nancy, are you online?
I am here.
Okay, feel free to go ahead and share your screen.
Thank you. As with everyone else, I'm delighted to be able to be here online. I'm sorry not to be there in person, but online is very, very much better than nothing. So here we go.
Can't see your screen yet, Nancy.
Well, it's coming right away.
Okay. All right, we can see it now.
No black bars in the middle, I hope. Okay. Well, here's a brief introduction to the journal. Some of you have seen this before. In fact, it's already been said that we are possibly the only journal that is free to publish for at least AAVSO members, fully open access, and professionally refereed. We include any content related to variable star research. In fact, other variable objects as well. Comets and asteroids, for example, are included. The sun is a star, and it's variable if you observe with enough precision. We cover observing techniques, software, and instrumentation, as well as statistical methods and modeling, education and public outreach, and history. So some of what you're about to see is just an update from last year. This is the first one of those. There we go. You see the total number of refereed articles for each year dating back to 2017. The current year is not yet complete, but what you see is the total number published or accepted as of October 25th, which was the day I prepared this slide. It says refereed articles, and I would point out that there is one major contribution to 2024, which was not refereed, but was edited by us, and that is the very interesting memoir by our previous editor, John Percy. You can see our content breakdown by topic. Eclipsing binaries are, as always, a major, although possibly somewhat smaller than formerly, portion of the content. Red giants and Myra variables are an increasing item, fairly clearly, partly owing to the research by John Percy and his students. Other is a very big category because it includes a lot of various things, including some of our most interesting offerings of the year. Okay, I want to say a little bit about the people who have a stake in this journal. We have about the same number of authors, some of whom have written more than one paper, as last year, 67 compared to 71. The pool of active referees is people who provide expert commentary on our articles is increasing by my efforts, by my design. I would like to see that number continue to grow. So here's the breakdown of the people who interact directly with the journal about papers. The amateur and professionals are roughly equal, although the balance tends to shift back and forth from year to year. And we have a number of students. And as has already been mentioned, we make an effort to ensure that students are able to present as near professional quality papers as possible. High school students are a good number of the total, but we also have some undergraduate and graduate students. We had a very nice talk by a pair of high school students yesterday about a paper that's currently in the editorial pipeline. Okay, last year a question was asked about citations. Citations are very important. These are references to papers in our journal by our authors and other authors elsewhere. If someone cites your paper, that means that they at least glanced at it, and everyone would like to know that their articles are being read. You can find out whether an article has been cited by looking it up in the NASA Astrophysics Data System, to which I give you the link here. And you can find out which JAAVSO papers have been referenced by looking up the particular volume in JAAVSO. So in my last editorial, my most recent editorial, I wrote about this, and I'm now providing an update. In making these counts, I do not include citations by authors to their own papers, because this does not provide a measure of what we would like to know, which is what kind of influence our journal is having and how well it's noticed in the larger astronomical community. So for the benefit of the handful of people in the audience who may not have read that editorial, here's the results. This is a little bit complicated graph. The height of the bars represents the number of citations, and each colored bar represents a volume starting with 2018 in light green. 2018 is the only one of these volumes that was cited in the same year it was published. And the reason for that was that it included discovery papers about the famous star named after Waagen, which has then mysterious eclipses. So each color bar represents a volume, and the location of the bar represents the year in which those papers were cited. Now, typically it takes a couple of years for a paper to get noticed in the literature and for the paper citing it to be written and published. So you can see a time lag for most of these between when they were published. For example, volume 47 didn't start getting cited until 2020. We had a lot, as you saw from a previous slide, we had a big peak in publications in 2020. And so some of these more numerous citations may reflect that peak. But you can see going across that the number of citations to each volume is pretty constant, more or less, with some fluctuations from year to year. Until, oh, and I forgot to mention the bar on the right represents citations in JAAVSO itself, and the higher bar represents citations in other journals. There's a notable peak in citations in 2024. I don't have a good explanation for that, except possibly it's owing to the efforts that are clearly being made to raise the profile of the AAVSO in the larger community. Okay, and so finally, thanks to everybody who helps produce this journal, particularly Elizabeth Waagen, Mike Saladiga, and Bert Pablo, who provides technical support. I want to thank for the management of the society for their continued support, and of course the authors and readers without whom we could not exist, and the people who provide technical comment, who put in a great deal of time and effort on reviewing each article, but get no public credit. However, you know who you are. And that is my last slide.
So we'll go ahead and take questions. So feel free to come on up to the front of the mic or front of the room and go to the mic. Yeah, just come on up.
Hello, Nancy. It's Jeremy Shears, Director of the Variable Star section of the BAA. Now, another hat I wear is Papers Secretary for the Journal of the BAA. And I'm absolutely intrigued by your numbers in terms of the numbers of submissions over the last few years, which I think are almost identical to what we've had in the BAA Journal. Peaking in 2020, pandemic year, everybody writing papers, but a steady decline since. And I'm just wondering myself whether that's something I should be worried about. And I'd be grateful for any insights that you could give about the trend that I've just seen in your slides.
I don't really have any insights that I am comfortable saying out loud, to be honest, although I've certainly thought about it. And like you, I'm concerned. I think there are some internal considerations that may be relevant. I don't know what broader considerations might be relevant.
Okay.
Sorry, that's one of those. Basically, that boils down to I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah. So we're both slightly worried, but we're not quite sure the reasons why.
Very good.
Kind of alluding to a forthcoming talk, Jeremy, there's trends in other places as well that follow the same pattern. So, yep. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, Nancy, are you encouraging people to post their accepted papers to the archive?
Yes, and thank you for asking that question. The archive is really designed for papers that have been accepted for publication, but not yet published. And for us, the time lapse between that those two events is, we usually hope, pretty short. So the usefulness of the paper on the archive is perhaps limited. But the plus is that I am told that a lot of, this isn't true of me, but a lot of professionals do their literature searching entirely on the archive, which means that being on the archive is a good way for your paper to get noticed. So yes, I would definitely encourage that.
Okay, any more questions from the audience for Nancy? If not, Elizabeth, any questions online? No? Okay, well, Nancy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next up in the series is going to be the announcement of the election results. So let me advance slides a little bit. Richard, if you can go ahead and come on up, and I'll get the screen sharing going again and turn the camera back on, unless Jacob is going to do it for me. Of course, I can't find my mouse now. There it is. And I think I also needed to turn this camera back on, right? Okay, all right. Yeah, and video. Okay, all right. Should be good to go, although it's not showing the video. Oh, there it goes. Okay, all right, we're good to go. Richard?
Okay. Thank you. Here are the results. Those who are elected are Tom Macaron. Good going, Tom. Molly Wakeling. And Diogo Teixeira. So those are our new board members for 2025 year. With the bylaws, it appears to be that, just looking at the numbers here,
It looks like everything except for item 4 passed.
everything excepting item 4. And which one was item 4 now? Ah,
Okay.
okay.
Okay. So for
Okay.
those, oh, go ahead, Richard. Just repeat what Elizabeth said.
What? Go ahead. Yeah, let's be sure that we.
The bylaws revision question that was defeated was the one that proposed limiting paying dues 60 days in advance. So that was not approved by the membership.
And it appears to have been a very, very close vote. Okay.
All right.
Sorry, Richard, for those who might have voted long enough ago that it's no longer fresh in their minds, could we just briefly tick through what the bylaws amendments were that were accepted? Oh, awesome.
Yes,
Thanks.
yes.
You don't have all 9 sets of bylaws revisions firmly cemented in your head? Having looked at them so often and in putting the ballot together, I do. Or I did. It's since been superseded by other information. Just one second. Just got to get to the right tab. Come on, come on. Here we are. Okay. Okay, question 1 was, should the AAVSO modify its bylaws to remove the category of organizational membership type? Answer was yes. Question 2, should the AAVSO amend its bylaws to establish a new associate member category? That was approved. Question 3, should the AAVSO amend its bylaws to decouple membership start and end dates from the fiscal year and introduce 12-month rolling memberships? Yes. Question 4, should the AAVSO amend its bylaws to explicitly state that dues cannot be paid more than 60 days in advance? No. Question 5, should the AAVSO amend its bylaws to permit the annual meeting of the members, our annual business meeting, to occur in person, virtually, or in hybrid format? Yes. Should the AAVSO amend its bylaws pertaining to elected directors to consolidate information pertaining to elected directors into a single section? Yes. Should the AAVSO amend its bylaws pertaining to elected directors to clarify that elected directors must run for re-election at the end of their term if they wish to continue to serve as an elected director on the board? Yes. Should the AAVSO amend its bylaws to extend the time frame for holding the annual meeting of the board from 1 week before the annual meeting of the members to 1 month before? Yes. And question 9 was clerical edits to the bylaws, and I'll get to that just 1 second. To come back to the other page. Ballot. Question 9, learn more. Come on. Oh, come on, open up. It's funny, it may not let me look at that at this point. Ballot. I'm not sure that I can, let me try again. Since the ballot is closed, I may not be able to, and those itemizations are in the details of that particular question.
Yeah, I think they were a series of.
They were basically clerical, straightening out bits and pieces that, basically dotting I's and crossing T's, not making any substantial changes, just fixing small things that were not efficiently organized.
Yeah, there were some other ones in there that, for a common one, for example, was that the word meeting was used to refer to the annual member meeting, which is this, as well as the annual meeting, which is the other science things that we're
Yes,
doing around here.
there were vagaries,
Yeah,
a number of vagaries in or ambiguities.
Yeah, and
in the wording.
word meeting also was for the annual board meeting, which was
Yeah.
on Friday. So we cleared up that.
Yeah,
that was probably the majority of the edits.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was confusing in the bylaws as they have just been changed. A single kind of operation was covered in 3 different places, which made it very hard to figure out exactly what was going on. So these changes actually make it much easier for the board to work with the bylaws. Okay.
Back to single no vote. What does it actually mean?
That was the, what's the impact of?
Oh, for that one, for the clerical errors or the clerical correction ones, or?
No, the number 4, the
Oh,
impact of that.
okay. So so that just means that there's effectively no limit in place unless Bob tells me otherwise as to when a membership can be purchased in advance. That has actually been a problem because we're carrying a series of prepaid dues ahead. And when we run our annual membership reports in past years, you might recall that last year it looked like we had 1,600 members. That's because our membership report included prepaid dues in there for the next fiscal year. So Bob, I don't know if you want to comment on that any further.
Not really. And the number of people who actually paid years in advance could be counted on one hand. But there was just a few things, where people were being carried multiple times in the membership list and causing some confusion. But either way, we can, especially with new software coming online soon, this will be easily dealt with.
Okay. All right. Thank
Okay.
you, Richard. Okay. Yes. Yeah, so congratulations to all the new board members. For those of you that aren't currently board members, so I guess it would be Molly Wakeling, I'll be sending you an email letting you know about onboarding activities here in the near future. All right. Okay, next up is me with the director's report, or sorry, the membership report first off. So just a quick overview, I'm going to provide an update on things from AAVSO headquarters, some information about growth that we've recently had in our membership, a discussion of some meetings that we've attended to promote the organization, and a brief discussion of our scientific impact as well as our education and public outreach impact. Oops. Oh, yeah. So, but before I get to those topics, one of the more fun things that I can do as executive director is look back into our history. And so I noticed the last time that we were here in Huntsville, Alabama, at least as far as I could determine, was in the year 2000 at the high energy astrophysics workshop that was being held. And there's several people that I recognize here in the photograph. Number 13, for example, that's Jerry. Walt Cooney, you're back and just a little bit to his left. Arnie is kind of up near the middle. Elizabeth is clear in the back left, number 56. And when we held this meeting, of course, Janet Matty was there in the front in her lovely blue dress. But there were several other people here. But it just shows that our organization has a really rich and wonderful history, and we've been here several times before in the past. First thing I'd like to just mention is a note about AAVSO's current board of directors. So here are the 15 people that serve on the board. And as you may recall, just shortly before I came on to the AAVSO as executive director, we used to have a council, and now we have a board. And that was as a result of Gordon Myers pushing for some changes within the organization. And that change from a council to a board may seem relatively subtle, but it came with a significant change of power structure within the organization. It used to be that the executive director really ran the AAVSO, but now the board provides three key administrative functions. They provide direction, they provide oversight, and they help with fundraising. And you'll see that over this last year, we've been doing a lot of those things. That's a lot of the strategic planning activities got kicked in and were initiated by the board collectively to ensure that our organization is successful. So for those of you that are board members that are in the room, if you could just please raise your hand and we can all thank you for your service that you've done to the organization. Next up, I'd also like to mention the staff here. In addition to the people that were here at last year's annual meeting, we have one additional individual that was added, and I think most of you probably met her at the reception table. That's Whitney Armenter. She joined as our development director. You'll notice here that almost I think in Chris's membership report, Chris's secretary's report, you heard her mention that about 50% of our people were remote last year. Now we're actually 60-40. And so being able to work in a hybrid format has really provided our organization with the ability to acquire talent that we wouldn't otherwise be able to find and afford in the Boston area. So everybody from the staff, I think there's just a couple of us here in the room, but a special thank you to, actually, everybody's here. Yep, so everybody's here in the room. So if you could please stand up and we can thank you for your service to the organization. And unfortunately, Aru and Tim couldn't be with us today, but I believe both of them may be watching the meeting online. We also have a couple of contractors that provide support to us. So Nancy Morrison has provided a variety of different grant writing and administrative support related to grants. And you heard from her just a few moments ago. And then Sebastian Otero, who has been really our strong leader leading VSX. He's been with us for many, many years. And so both of them work remotely for us at the AAVSO. So if we could please give both of them a round of applause. So all in told, we have a total of 8.2 FTE that work for the AAVSO, and an FTE for us is 35 hours per week rather than 40 hours. So that's 6.1 as staff, 1 as the executive director, and 1.1 FTE as contractors. We also have a series of different volunteers that support our organization, and this is really, the thing that makes AAVSO be able to perform a lot of its functions. These include individuals that serve on a variety of different board committees. This year, I'd like to give a special amount of thanks to the Strategic Planning Committee, as well as the Marketing and Development Committees. We've had a series of working groups, including the Project Assessment Working Group, which you've heard a little bit about during this meeting already, and recently the Smart Telescope Working Group. Many of those individuals are here in the room. Software development and support. We've had a lot of work on these different software products. David Ben, for example, has maintained VStar, I think, since 2009. And so he's really been instrumental in keeping that software up and running. And George Silvis, he's in the room someplace. He's over here. He's also not only provided support for Sun Entry, but also he is the single person that both maintains and helps us operate VFOD, which is, of course, a very monumental task. We have a variety of science support roles, including AAVSO net operations, charts and sequences, data validation, the JAAVSO editors and referees, section leaders, as well as individuals helping maintain VSX, and people that are doing education and public outreach, which falls under choice instructors, the mentor program, providing talks to clubs and webinars. All in told, there's over 200 people that support volunteer roles within the organization. So if you have volunteered for the AAVSO, could you please raise your hand and we'd like to thank you. All right. Good to see so many hands go up within the audience. One role that I'd like to pay special attention to is the role of VSX, because it's one of the things that we do that's not really fully understood or appreciated by members. And here I show a plot of the number of variable stars that we have captured within the variable star index. And if you haven't heard of VSX before, this is effectively a metadata database about variable stars. So if it's a variable star, we probably know something about it. It almost always ends up in this database. You can see that kind of around the year 2018, we started importing data from Gaia, which was the really large jump. Presently, we have about 2.34 million variable stars in VSX, and the next update, which is coming soon, will add an additional 9 million variable stars to the database. And this work has really been spearheaded by Sebastian, Leo, and Alex, as well as a couple other members. And so I'd like to publicly acknowledge them and say thank you for the hard work that you do. But maybe to like start up a rivalry between the data team and the VSX team here, we've only ever observed 35,000 of that, what will soon be, 11.34 million. So you guys got a little catch up to do. And as Chris mentioned in her secretary's report, this accounts for 26% of the reasons why professionals cite the AAVSO. So it is truly one of the most important things that we do, but perhaps one of the least appreciated things. And you'll hear in in the strategic planning meeting that we're going to be changing that around, and we're going to provide a lot more support for VSX. Here's a plot of the the total number of members that we've had over the last decade, going from 2014 to 2024. It's based upon a fiscal year basis. You can see around the year 2020 and 2021, there was a fairly large hill that occurred. Of course, that was during the COVID pandemic, and then it dropped off fairly precipitously afterward. Jeremy, this was the trend that I was mentioning earlier that we see within the journal. We also see it within our membership. My take is people realized that they could go outside. So they were cooped up during the pandemic. But in the last couple of years, we actually have had a slight growth in membership. It's only on the level of about 2%. But we're kind of back to the level that we were, 2018 level. So it's a not terrible concern in my mind. In terms of the meetings that we attend, of course, we had our 112th annual meeting last year in Somerville. We also went to the Chara Consortium meeting. We had volunteers present at NEAF and NEAC this year. I attended the Astro ED-UNC conference, which is a really interesting education-focused conference that was asking a series of what were called dangerous questions related to how astronomy education should or could be taught within the United States. There was the Society for Astronomical Sciences meeting in Ontario, California, Alcon 2024 down in Overland Park, Kansas, as well as Stellafane that was held up in Vermont. And on the right-hand side, you can see a couple of different photos from those meetings. The annual meeting, of course, is in the upper right. Bert, Mark, and Peter presented there at Stellafane. And beyond us going out and promoting our own work, I'd also like to give a shout out to Scott Harrington, who you might know from Sky and Telescope. He featured a lot of different AAVSO data during the Alcon meeting down in Overland Park, Kansas. So the work that we are doing is not just being promoted by ourselves, but also by the broader community. This is the first year that I've broken out observers by their interest area, and I've presented in two different ways. Both of these charts show the number of observers for the last decade by fiscal year from 2014 to 2024. On the left-hand side is the absolute count. And so in yellow, that's the number of solar observers. In blue, that's the number of AID observers. Orange is AAVSPEC contributors, and gray is ExoDB observers. And you can see that we presently have about 1,300, I think 1,356 observers total as of 2024. And one thing to note is on the right-hand side, it's the same data but presented in a fractional form. You can see that the exoplanet observers there in gray have really grown precipitously over the last several years. And so they're actually representing the largest growth area within our organization, are people contributing to the exoplanet database. And in terms of the contribution to science, I usually display these on separate plots, but everything's going up, and so I decided just to summarize them all on one slide. The stellar photometry database, AID, went up by 8.7% year over year. We saw the stellar spectroscopy database go up by 15% year over year. Exoplanet photometry by 63% year over year growth. And then finally, the solar observation database only grew by 4%. And Chris, if I remember correctly, that was because it was cloudy. Yeah. So it does have a little marked dip in the top, but it was just because of extra clouds this year. But otherwise, everything else looks healthy in terms of the growth of the databases. I'd also like to note a new milestone for AAVSPEC. I went out and I polled the total number of spectra submitted to a whole bunch of different databases. Ours is in blue. The BAA SpecDB is there in gray. ARAS is in yellow, and that's the total number of observations between their different data sets that they collect. And then the best database is in green. On the left-hand side, you can see that AAVSPEC has just taken out ARAS, and so we're now the number 2, according to that chart, on the left database for spectroscopic data. But if you look on the one on the right-hand side, we're pretty far behind the best database, but about 2/3 of that data actually came from professional observatories. So we're making good progress in terms of our growth. And despite the fact that we started several years after many of these other databases, we're moving up quite quickly. And I'd like to attribute that to the excellent work that's being done within the spectroscopy section, as well as the hard work that Lauren has put in terms of grading and ranking spectra. Now, if you're wondering how your observations help out professional astronomers, this is one chart that kind of displays in total the kind of work that AAVSO does. On the left-hand side is the number of alerts or observing campaigns that we execute versus time for the last 20 years, and that's by calendar year. That's an important thing here. And then article citation using the word AAVSO anywhere within the full text on the right-hand side. You can see that on the left, it's the same kind of trend that Chris mentioned in her secretary's report, where the total number of observing campaigns that we've done basically for the last decade is kind of down. This last year, we did 28 observing campaigns, whereas we actually just got 2, so it's a little bit higher, so it'll continue to go up through the rest of the year. And in terms of the number of peer-reviewed publications that are citing AAVSO research on the right-hand side, we presently sit at about 215 citations, but I think that we'll probably come up to about 250 citations by the end of the calendar year. This is another place, Jeremy, where you can see the same trend around COVID. There was a lot of people publishing papers when they were indoors. And so just a high-level statistic, if we say that we have 250 papers and 1,340 observers, that's kind of a 20% chance at random that your data would be picked for any single one of these papers. However, if you collect data in a way that the professional astronomers prefer, you're much more likely to be cited. And then lastly, I'm going to summarize our education and public outreach activities kind of just in one slide. For the first year, I've actually shown the number of mentor requests that we've had per year. Unfortunately, we don't have really good records going back before 2017, so I can't go for a whole decade. But we did have 35 new mentor requests. And for those of you who have done mentoring, you know that 35 new people coming in and asking lots of questions is an absolute a large amount of work. And therefore, the people that do mentoring really deserve a lot of credit. In the upper right-hand corner, that's our total number of choice participants, still over about 100 people, a slight uptick from last year simply because we offered 1 additional choice courses, so it's directly correlated there. More choices courses we offer, the more people typically attend. And down at the bottom is the total number of webinars. In orange is the number of attendees, and in gray is the number of YouTube viewers after 90 days. We have seen a trend where the total number of attendees in our webinars have been slowly decreasing over time. And the same thing goes for our YouTube views as well. It's still trending down a little bit, but we're going to give it one more year just to see how things are going. But in either case, the webinars that we present are actually the AAVSO's #1 education and public outreach activity, reaching over 10,000 people each year. All right, so in conclusion, for the membership report, I'd just like to say that our growth in membership has resumed after a couple years of going down after the pandemic. We have one new staff member, which is Whitney Armiter, and she's serving as our development director. Volunteerism, I believe, is at an all-time high. We've had really good scientific impact where the number of observers grew by 24%, most of those people within the exoplanet world. Year-over-year growth in our databases was somewhere between 4 to 63%. We're probably on track. I didn't mention this in my presentation, but in Nancy's presentation, it looks like we're on track for perhaps 25 journal papers this year in JAAVSO, and probably 250 non-JAAVSO papers. That's interesting. That's just an even factor of 10 in between the two of them. In terms of education and public outreach, 35 new mentees this year, over 100 people took choice courses, and our webinars reached over 10,000 people. So I'd be happy to take any questions. Okay, any questions online, Elizabeth? Okay.
From Richard Post, what is being done to increase membership of young participants?
So in this year, unfortunately, we shut down our ambassador program, which was our primary method of reaching out to younger people. Unfortunately, we didn't have any staff to be able to support that program throughout most of the year. Going into 2025 within our strategic plan, which you'll hear later today, we'll be actually allocating some explicit efforts to try to recruit younger people to join our organization. Anything else online? Nope. Okay. All right, next up is the director's report. Next year, I'll try to swap somebody else in here so you don't have to listen to me for like 40 minutes, make it a little bit more entertaining. All right, so the bottom line up front with the director's report is a little bit different. So I think we made a lot of great progress on our strategic goals. But with that said, professional astronomers have a lot of choices and very high demands in terms of where they get their data. We've seen that sky surveys, they're actually producing too much data for professional astronomers to follow up. So that presents some opportunities for amateur astronomers. And in terms of talking with the major sky surveys, every one of them has told me that they want not only want, but they absolutely need your help to be able to follow up on many of the transient events that they're discovering within their data sets. But in order to help them out and achieve many of the goals that we're going to be talking about in the strategic plan later today, we need to change how we're going to operate. And so one thing that we noticed when we were executing the CHARA campaign is that they are looking for stars that are really bright, so brighter than 5th magnitude. And with the exception of our PEP observers, almost nobody can look at them. I ran a nice experiment with Ken Menzies, and it was pretty hard for us to do CCD observations in a PEP-style observational mode. So that's relatively difficult. And then I was at the flux calibration workshop at Space Telescope about 2 weeks ago, and professional astronomers are pushing for absolute flux calibration, not relative flux calibration, but absolute flux calibration at a 1% level. And there's a lot of things that exist within the way that AAVSO operates that makes it difficult to achieve that level of precision when you use people's data in aggregate. An individual observer can get 1% or 0.1%, but once you pull everybody together, there's a lot of systematic differences that are causing issues to aggregate the data. So my wife told me that I was a millennial and I'm allowed to use emojis. So down in the lower right-hand corner, there'll be a smiley face that'll give you kind of a high-level overview of my opinion of how we did this year. So for our first goal, which was 2024 strategic goal, our first one was to establish our place in modern astronomy, and I think we did really well here. The subtasks were to launch a headquarter managed program with ESA Plato and the NASA Habitable World Observatory. Although we did not get them running this year, we actually have programs that are coming next year, including a new exoplanet and a new eclipsing binary program from Plato starting in 2025, as well as a program that I'll be starting later this year with Rachel Rotenbacher to follow up on some of the Habitable World Observatory slides. You might remember from the opening talk on Friday night, John Blevins, he mentioned that there was a HabX spacecraft that they were going to be launching with the new STS rocket. It's been renamed to be the Habitable World Observatory, and so that's that satellite. We started conducting our demographic survey to try to figure out where we are in terms of our population that we serve. And then we've started to develop some guidance for Sky Survey collaboration, which I'll talk about on the next following slides. So in the next 3 years, we're going to see several new observatories and new sky surveys coming online. You might have heard just about 2 weeks ago, the Vera Rubin Observatory, which has a price tag of about $1.9 billion with a B. They actually did the first on-sky testing of their camera, and so they're coming along relatively soon. In 2026, the European Space Agency is going to be launching the Plato spacecraft, which I like to call kind of like the Kepler for bright stars. So these little telescopes, I forget their exact diameter, but they're going to be observing stars basically up to like 6th magnitude on most of them, and there's a few smaller telescopes which will get up to 2nd magnitude, and so they're going to be monitoring large swaths of the sky with that. And then my personal favorite, the Argus array here on the right-hand side. This is 900 co-mounted 8-inch telescopes. This is one AAVSO effectively in one observatory. It will have an instantaneous field of view of about 120 degrees. And so basically anything over that thing will be covered and viewed with very similar sized telescopes to what most of us have, well, at least what I have in my backyard. All of these, I've spoken with folks from every single one of these organizations, and they all want to work with us, and they need to work with us in order to accomplish some of the scientific objectives that they have. We completed a summary of different photometric sky surveys, which I believe I showed this to you all last year, but we've extended it upon a little bit. This graph on the left-hand side shows the coverage that amateur astronomers can offer, and the color, the length of the bar effectively is the magnitude range which you can cover, and the color indicates the number of filters that can be observed in. You can see that amateur astronomers basically capture a large portion of the brighter range, with the exception of perhaps some of Gaia in the G-band and TESS. And then once these other Argus, for example, comes on, it's going to be looking at things that may be as bright as maybe 5th magnitude, but they haven't given me precise specifications. And so we can pretty much own the brighter sky if we wanted to. And we can also help these sky surveys that are looking at fainter objects as well. And so there's a good opportunity for collaboration between the two of this. In terms of these future programs that are going to be coming online, most of them are going to be focusing on relatively faint stars, so like 16th to 25th magnitude, which is usually out of the range of what we do. But all of the surveys have indicated that when eruptive events like nova start to get brighter and brighter, they need to hand them off to somebody to follow them. And that's an interesting place where amateur astronomers can help out, say, looking at like 17th and 18th magnitude nova, and if they peak, they can continue the light curve and produce complementary data in that way. I think you all know that the LSST is going to be observing in Sloan filters as opposed to Johnson-Cousin filters. And then lastly, the Argus array, it's really interesting. They're going to be alternating the filters in the different telescopes. Originally, they were going to build a giant 2-meter Sloan green filter, but they instead decided to put them in the telescopes instead. And the telescopes are going to be equipped with either a Sloan G or a custom filter that is effectively G plus R band. And they think they're going to be able to back out multicolor photometry from that. As I mentioned, it has a 120-degree field of view, and it's basically going to be able to cover anything from about 0th magnitude down to 24 magnitude, depending on how they're observing and how they're stacking. And so it's a really interesting instrument. But the takeaway here is that most of the photometry that we produce is very complementary to what they have. And Scott, I didn't leave you out. In terms of spectroscopy, yes, you're welcome. The surveys are very similar in terms of capabilities. So on the right-hand side, these plots where you see the bar, the amateur capabilities are summarized on the left-hand side, professional facilities are on the right-hand side. The top is the wavelength range in nanometers that are covered. And you can see that we basically cover stuff that's kind of from maybe about let's say 500 to maybe 750, or kind of on average, depending on the device that we have. In terms of limiting magnitudes, we kind of start to lose our ability to cover fainter stars, maybe around 9th magnitude, but some of the low resolution spectrometers can perhaps get down to about 14th magnitude. If you compare that with just visually with what the other sky surveys are capable of observing, you can see there's actually pretty good overlap with a few cases. And then in other situations, right, we continue to own the bright sky. And so there's an opportunity for us to study these bright objects in detail, as well as a good opportunity for us to collaborate with some of the sky surveys. Now in terms of goal 2, which is the tech infrastructure, so we got the super smiley face down there. We deployed a lot of good things, including a new authentication system, a new Julian date calculator, new observing campaign application, the new forum software. We're presently replacing the WebObs with a completely new application. You can see here on the right-hand side, that's a preview of what the new application will actually look like. George has been very instrumental in terms of testing that. And then we're beginning to migrate our website content, and we intend to do that between November and December. I will say that our website presently has 60,000 web pages on it, and we're not going to take all 60,000 with us. We do have a plan to archive that content. We're probably going to take maybe about the top 500 pages, and we've also devised a method where if you come to the website and you miss the page, you'll get redirected to the other one, and then we can log that, and if it turns out a page needs to be migrated, we can catch it later on. So no content should be lost as a result of the migration. In terms of goal 3, which was to implement the data quality task force recommendations, I think we did okay, but not as good as the other ones. So our first objective here was to apply metrics and monitoring to the AID data. This turns out to be deceptively difficult. The idea was to make mean light curves and then see if a data point was in that mean light curve or outside of it. But it turns out that because our data has a lot of systematic issues, you can't really construct a mean light curve very easily. And so it requires a lot of manual intervention. Both the quality checks at submission times and as well as the data packaging for researchers has been integrated into the new AID app, the new WebObs replacement application. Arnie offered a choice course to help improve observer knowledge, and unfortunately we had to punt the quantity over quality, the quality over quantity objective to this next fiscal year. We'll be forming a committee to try to figure out how to award people who are producing high quality data. If anybody's interested in serving on that committee, please let me know. Next up is our first stretch goal, which was to reduce the barrier to variable star research, and this was to build and deploy an application for smart telescopes. The Smart Telescope Working Group has been making really good progress. You can ask Matt or Mark in here about how that's going. Unfortunately, it looks like we may not be able to deploy that by the end of the year. It might slip a little bit into 2025, but I think that'll come along pretty easily. And then lastly, in terms of building ties with stronger research, this was our last stretch goal. I think the CHARA collaboration is going reasonably well. We had Gail here, Gail Schaefer from CHARA. She's their director. She was at our last annual meeting, and that did entice a lot of people to participate with CHARA, but we found with one observing campaign that was looking at first, second, and third magnitude stars, both photometrically and spectroscopically. We got plenty of spectra, but we didn't get a lot of photometry on a second magnitude star. And so unfortunately, that one researcher, we kind of failed him in that situation. But we were able to find some other data sources that allowed him to do the science that he wanted. We made some pretty good progress with both ESO Plato and the Habitable World Observatory, and some kind of lessons learned that we took out of this is that bright stars turned out to be fairly difficult, even for amateurs to observe. But when we say bright, we mean like brighter than 5th magnitude. And then we learned something interesting was that researchers want different things than what AAVSO traditionally provides in our data. So an example is in one of the spectroscopic campaigns, they didn't just want spectra, they wanted radial velocity data, right? And so in order to acquire and calibrate your spectra in such a way that you get radial velocity data, you have to pay very close attention to your calibration lamps. And it wasn't, we did a reasonable job of that, but I'm still waiting to hear back from the observer if the data was sufficiently good. And there was one special CHARA campaign which I executed along with Tom and Ken. They just wanted photometry of stars. They weren't variable stars, right? And it turned out to be a really interesting activity. And we looked at how CCD and PEP data overlaps at those brightest ranges, and we found systematic differences between the two of them. And so if we're going to adapt to move into adapt to be able to support these new needs of professional astronomers as they're developing, we're probably going to have to spend some time developing some new education and training activities. And lastly, I'd like to mention that as of today, we're going to start kicking off our 2024 annual campaign. And so there'll be a slide up here on the screen where if you want to donate to the campaign, you can scan in the QR code. And we definitely appreciate your support. And we've done really good work during this last year. Okay, I'll open up the floor to questions. See, Elizabeth has a few from online. Yeah, you can come on up too, Tom.
I have one from online from Richard Post. Professionals I collaborate with want APAS or Sloan filter data. Should we support data submission and at least APAS filters?
The APAS filter set is Johnson B, Johnson V, and then Sloan U, G, R, I, Z, and Y. I believe Y is in there as well. It would be useful to begin providing data in those different filters. It seems like it's kind of the way to go. But I've also we heard from Brad Schaefer on Monday that nobody's going to use Sloan filters. And so it's kind of Arnie just tossed his head back there. It's a, we'll see how things evolve. Tom?
Yeah, you were talking about the problems with the bright stars, and you mentioned photoelectric and CCDs. What about CMOS? Doesn't that kind of give you a compromise?
CMOS has a lot of the same problems. Each one of the sensor technologies has its different strengths and its different weaknesses. With the CMOS sensors, you can take really short exposures and read them out really quickly. The problem is they start to develop nonlinearities at really short exposure times.
Okay.
So I was trying to do photometry on Beta Aurigae, a Mag 2 star, with an 8-inch telescope, and I saturated in 10 milliseconds. And so it was a really fast system. That's why I saturated so quickly. And so you have to approach it very differently. You need to stack your images until you get about 10 seconds worth of data. And 10 seconds at 10 milliseconds is a lot of pictures.
Yeah. And then the other thought I have about how to deal with these really bright stars is, have we had people experiment with defocusing on purpose or using a diffuser?
The DSLR folks actually defocus as part of their work, and it tends to work reasonably well. The problem, though, is that you start to interject additional noise from different pixels. And so if you want to say, like, if there were an exoplanet around a Mag 2 star, right, like you wouldn't want to do that because you'd be getting so much additional noise from all of these different pixels. In the case of CMOS sensors, right, each pixel has its own amp.
Yeah.
And so you have to correct for, well, we presently don't do this, but one should eventually start correcting for pixel-dependent amplifier differences.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
You mentioned a new authentication system?
Yes.
And what is, can you describe that more?
So we rolled out there were a bunch of emails about that. I think Bert and I can both attest to that. So in the lower left-hand corner, that's the new authentication system. So it used to be that we had our own in-house authentication system, and each one of our applications handled authentication somewhat differently. But now we have a single global authentication system where if you log into the www.aavso.org and then you go to apps, plural.aavso.org, it takes you in automatically, and so you don't have to log in many different places. There's a few exceptions to this, which are some of our oldest applications, as well as the Target tool, I think, are not integrated with this yet.
Okay, I was thinking it was related to the submission of the data.
No.
Thank-
Go ahead, Rick.
My question has to do with the membership. The name of our organization doesn't mention the word amateur, but much of the sort of implications you've made suggest that we are an amateur organization, but I know we've got a number of professional astronomers who are here, including yourself, and who are not here. So do you have any idea what the percentage of our membership is who are if not currently employed as a professional, but are perhaps educated to a doctoral level or something similar to that?
Yeah, the most accurate information I think I could give you comes from a demographic survey that we did back in 2011. And unfortunately, I don't recall the distribution between folks that had a PhD degree. But then again, right, we have people that have PhDs that are not getting paid to do astronomy, which is what I would call an amateur astronomer, right? It's somebody that loves the field and loves the experience and hobby. There might be a way that I could generate that type of a report in the future and get a general idea, but fortunately I can't give it to you today. Okay. Any other questions? And anything else online? Nope. Okay. All right, so we'll move on to awards. So I'll welcome Richard back up to the podium.
Okay, thank you, Brian. We have a lot of awards. let's see.
Use, this
Ah,
one.
yes,
Yep,
yes.
there you go.
Okay. And first is the Merit Award, which is being awarded to Gordon Myers.
Talking to the mic or.
Oh, yes. The Merit Award this year goes to Gordon Myers. Are you coming up here? In recognition of his dedicated service and many contributions to the AAVSO, among which are serving for the board in several capacities, including as president 2018 to 2020, driving changes to the structure of the organization, and shepherding the adoption of the new bylaws, guiding the AAVSO through the early stages of the COVID crisis, creating the Transform Generator program that is used by many observers, submitting over 695,000 CCD observations, mostly of cataclysmic variables, and supporting the organization through substantial financial donations. So thank you, Gordon. Thank you very much. Yes. Yes, there we go. Very good. All right, find the clicker again. Come on, click. It's not working. Ah. Okay, and the Alcott Award this year goes to Gary Walker. Here we go. For his promotion of variable astronomy, variable star astronomy through his service and leadership on the AAVSO Council and Board, his service on the CCD Committee and development of CCD observing techniques for variable star data, and his investigative work with the CMOS detectors, his contributions to developing and maintaining AAVSONet, and his careful CCD observations contributed to the AAVSO International Database in support of observing campaigns. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for all the work you've done for AAVSO. Okay, we would like to honor the service of the retiring board members. And you are to come up here via the back stairway there. Don't trip. Sarah Ostrin Willis, Dr. Dennis Conti, Christine Larson, who is rotating off the board after years of serving as our secretary, and I think we figured, what, 14 years of, yes. Dr. Eric Hintz and Pat Boyce. Pat was not able to be here today. He is now working with the Boyce Foundation, doing great work similar to and parallel to what AAVSO does. Okay, yes. Well, thanks much, you guys. It's been a real pleasure working with you this year. We really, and when I look at your little medals, as an amateur telescope maker, I keep thinking, I wish it was round and we could grind a parabola onto it. Yes. Okay, and I should be very clear. The amount of work that it takes to serve on the board is large. Every one of these people has put in a lot of time and thought and energy into working for you guys. The Observing Awards now. Oops, you have to go back. There we go. Okay. I'm going to put the mic on this because I can't hold it and read these at the same time. Okay, to Ira Bell for 100 exoplanet observations. To Christine Larson for the cumulative contribution of, since 1999, of 1,500 sunspot observations in support of the American Relative Sunspot Number Program in service to the AAVSO Solar Observing Program through September 2024. To Ken Mason for contributing 50 exoplanet observations. Ken? To Gordon Myers for the invaluable contribution of over 700,000 charge coupled device variable star observations to the AID in September 2024. That's a single one. Yeah, sorry.
Gonna take 3. Thanks.
Ricardo St. Hilaire for 500 sunspot observations in support of the American Relative Sunspot Number Program. To Gerard Smolik for the invaluable contribution of 1.4 million CCD observations. I've known Jerry for many, many years since we were both members of the Milwaukee Astronomical Society. And he would run around making visual observations of 12 stars at the same time. And then he switched to CCDs. To Dinesh Shetty for a contribution of 5 exoplanet observations. Are you here? To Magdalena.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're here. Very good. To Magdalena Sakarlik. Is she here? Yes. Yeah, you have to.
Oh, no, that's not me. No, no. Nope.
Magdalena here? Okay. Your a certificate will be sent to you if you're not here. And finally to Mike Wiles for 1,000 charge couple device variable star observations to the AID. So Mike? And now on to the special awards. Oh, it's not each one is a separate one. Okay. To Walt Cooney, new member of the Argolander Society. Okay. Congratulations, Walt. Thank you. And this is to Brad Schaefer. It's a 50-year membership certificate. Is he here? Ah, there we go. Come on up.
Okay, I'll do the last one.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So I'll do the last one. So I have the honor of uh, giving one final special award to Elizabeth Waagen. So Elizabeth has served as an employee of the AAVSO for a total of 45 years. And I went back through our history book and collected a series of photographs here. You can see that Elizabeth has been present as staff at our Concord Avenue facility. A lot of her early role models were Margaret Mayle Hofflet and Janet Matty. She served as staff at our Birch Street facility in 1996, and then also staff within our Bay State Road facility. And you can see that she's also staff here at the Alewife Brook Parkway. She also served within the organization through several different executive directors. Elizabeth, you've just been an absolute asset to our organization, and your dedication just goes beyond anything that I can possibly imagine. So Elizabeth, please come on up.
Thank you very much. I know we're on a timeline, but I just wanted to say that what started out as a one-year job right out of college has been a great ride for 45 years. And of course, things have evolved from punch cards to where we are today. I asked Brian if you could include the slide of Margaret and Dorrit and Janet, who were my role models and my mentors, and taught me so many things about so many, not just the AAVSO, not just astronomy, about life, about people, about how to be a good human being. And I hope I carry some of them with me. I know I carry them all in my heart. Anyway, Dorrit had a great saying that Janet used. Well, two things. Janet would say, when we were in a crisis mode or something was complicated or challenging or not quite on schedule, she would say, "This too shall pass." And she said Dorrit taught her that. And because Dorrit certainly had a life filled with unexpected events that she went through and triumphed in spite of. And the other thing that Dorrit said was, Dorrit, for those of you who didn't know, was an astronomer who worked professionally in the field for over 90 years, or for 90 years. Well, no, that's an exaggeration, over 80 years. She was 100 when she died, and she was doing research until she was 98. And she started when she was 21. Anyway, she said, work for the work's sake, and it will become part of you. And I didn't really understand that for a long time, but I truly have come to understand that when you work for the work's sake, not for what it will, not for personal reward or anything, but for the sake of what you're doing, it does become part of you. And I am incredibly grateful that the AAVSO is a big part of me. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And so that does conclude our membership meeting, and perhaps for the first time in history, we're actually ahead of schedule. And so we have a nice long 1-hour coffee break. And over in the other room, you'll find some little bags of chocolates to help celebrate Elizabeth's 45th year at the AAVSO. So please enjoy this long break that we have. We'll reconvene at 11:30 Central Time. And if you get the chance, please stop and talk with Elizabeth. Thank you.
Validation.
Oh, yeah.
Give it a talk on.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, and validating in real time, you were talking about.
Yeah.
That's my ideas about that.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, no. Okay, yeah. Bert Pablo, he's our staff astronomer. He has just walked out the door.
Okay.
But we had the data quality task force did a series of investigations in the data. They recommended a variety of different analytics, and then we tried to apply several of them. They worked in specific cases. All right, I see people are trickling in, so we'll go ahead and get started in just a few minutes. So Lauren, can you tell if everybody's online? Okay, a lot of people online. Okay.
Okay, very good.
So
Okay, so this is designated as the strategic plan meeting. And Brian and I are going to do a two-part presentations. I'm going to basically give you a background in history, and Brian's going to provide details for how, at least rough details on how we would begin to execute this. And what I wanted to do is to give you a timeline of how we got to be where we are today. Well, we still have people coming in. Let me give them another 60 seconds to settle in and get. There's a continuous trickle of people coming in the back of the room, so we're. Stragglers and outliers, data points which we don't want to cut off, but we still.
Sure, for those who are here, and then we can repeat it at the end for those who come in. Everybody, as you're gathering for this session, we're going to be taking the group photograph. I'm sorry we haven't, I forgot to have us announce that first thing this morning. We're going to be taking the group photograph at the end of this session in this room. There are no hillsides on the facility or staircases that the grass is too wet, and there are no stairs. So we're going to take it in here. So please don't go anywhere at the end of this session. Just stay here. And we're out telling people who are not here yet. But anyway, so we'll be passing out sheets with the usual number, and we'll give you instructions at the time. So just please hang here at the end. We'll make it as quick as possible before the lunch break. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. An organization without a plan is an organization without a future. Without a clear path forward, such an organization is unlikely to achieve the full long-term success, and it's essentially drifting. For almost a decade, faced with the rapidly changing technology, the changing needs of professional astronomers, and the impending era of large-scale surveys, AAVSO has sought to draft and construct such a plan. We finally, at this point, want to announce an actionable plan for moving forward. You could summarize it maybe in 3 words. If someone asks you what we do, science, astronomy, and stars. So today I'm going to talk about why such a plan is necessary and provide you with a brief history of how it came to be. Then our Executive Director, Brian Kloppenberg, will discuss the primary goals of our strategic plan and how we will implement those goals. It's important to understand, however, that a 5-year strategic plan is not cast in concrete. Any good plan, any useful plan is flexible. It's a living plan that will change and evolve as we try things, fail or succeed, take stock, and continue moving forward. Throughout the 70s and 80s, AAVSO experimented with ongoing changes in technology. A decade later, CCDs revolutionized stellar photometry. I played a small role in this change with the publication of the CCD Camera Cookbook, a book which told you how to build your own CCD camera for like $350 in parts. Altogether, the 1990s and early 2000s were very productive years for AAVSO. The death of Janet Maddie in 2004 heralded the end of an era. Hiring a new director, Arnie Hendon, in 2005 brought out renewed energy. In the words of Tom Williams and Mark Saladega in Advancing Variable Star Astronomy, an extensive history of the AAVSO from the time of its founding, and well worth getting a copy and reading, by the way. Hendon focused on accelerating the science. We were moving toward more science content in AAVSO. Staff included more than a dozen experts. It was a very large staff compared to today. And 2 major grants, funding for APAS from the Robert Martin Ayers Fund and an NSF grant funding the Citizen Sky Epsilon Aurigae program, enhanced AAVSO overall standing. At the time, AAVSO was strongly invested in education as well as science. But the global financial crisis of 2007 and 2008 proved to be a massive setback. Although council cut expenses and staff dramatically, when Stella Kafka began as director in 2015, council recommended or mandated still more staff cuts to a bare bones paid 5 employees, a bare bones staff of 5. Recovery from such deep cuts was difficult. The available budget was too small to support AAVSO's normal activities, and even then the draw on the investment portfolio was not sustainable. When Gordon Myers was elected as president in 2018, he brought with him a business orientation. Gordon and Stella applied to the Harvard Business School's Community Action Partners program that advises nonprofit organizations. The work began in early 2019 and continued more than a year, right through the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. During this lengthy effort, board members met weekly, sometimes with the CAP team, to define the mission, stakeholders, finances, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, all standard nonprofit business analyses. In June 2020, we had an AAVSO strategic plan. But before I go any further with that, what results can an organization expect from a strategic plan? A strategic plan provides direction for the organization. It ensures that all parts of the organization know where the organization wants to go. It reduces or eliminates pet projects and increases overall efficiency. Everybody's moving in the same direction. A strategic plan, because of the way it's created, is based on facts, not opinions. It's the result of surveys, statistics, financial analysis. And because its creation has been a team effort, everyone has the same facts. A strategic plan provides rationale for allocating resources. It focuses the organization's energies and provides support for activities that will advance the organization's goals. And finally, perhaps most important, it gives the leaders of the organizations confidence to move forward according to a carefully crafted and agreed upon plan. The June 2020 strategic plan resulted in several important actions. Because the headquarters building cost money to maintain and returned little value, AAVSO sold the headquarters building in 2021 and placed the proceeds in the investment portfolio. Executive Director Kafka reported, strategic plan work took up much of the board's activities for the year in concert with CAP. Some of the initiatives suggested as part of that process have been eliminated. These included new and improved programs and communications with members, marketing, technical operations, finances, and fundraising. The pandemic required finding new ways of working for both staff and as an organization. However, in December 2021, accepting a job offer from the American Meteorological Society, Executive Director Stella Kafka resigned. Kathy Speirer served as acting director during our search for a new executive director. We began the year of 2023 with a new executive director. The job description specified the tools and methods of astronomy are changing rapidly. We seek an executive director receptive of new ideas and proposals, willing to embrace and accept necessary change, and able to communicate effectively with the membership, the staff, our observers, and the researchers who draw on and use AAVSO data. We found that person in Brian Kloppenberg, now our executive director. The job description was effectively a mandate for change. In his first year, 2023, Brian reviewed the 2021 strategic plan. Sadly, although it espoused lofty goals and high aspirations, plan lacked actionable plans for their implementation of those goals. Working quickly, Brian created and announced the near-term actionable goals for fiscal year 2024. To establish AAVSO's place in modern astronomy, to build strong ties with researchers, to reduce barriers to participating in variable star research. And Brian reported on that earlier this morning. Operationally, Brian laid the groundwork for solid IT infrastructure, hired a software developer to do the necessary work in-house, and improved the quality of AAVSO data through improved data submission and retrieval portals. However, the 2024 implementation plan had been an interim solution. Early this year, the board established two new committees, a program assessment working group to determine the cost and value returned to the member by every single activity carried out by the AAVSO, and a committee of 6 board members to craft a 5-year strategic plan. I was a member of that strategic plan committee, along with Dave Cowell, Walt Cooney, Bob Bookheim, Peter Bielo, and Brian. We used John Bryson's book, Strategic Planning, as our guide and template. And Brian will show you some slides for that diagram what that process looks like. The Bryson book provides a detailed guide to the process of crafting a plan. It's almost 500 pages dedicated to crafting goals tailored to the specific circumstances of an organization. In an orderly multi-step process, we considered and debated the mandates, mission, values, both external and internal environments in which we exist, and the strategic issues that we face as an organization. We met every week and sometimes more often. Each member drafted and we all edited sections. Brian consulted with other executive directors, spoke with researchers, dug into member surveys and data usage statistics. And one of the things that the CAP process had done was had gotten lots and lots of in-depth interviews with our membership. At times, the work felt like slogging through endless detail. Absolutely. We reported to the whole board regularly, shared analyses with them, and sponsored a few lengthy email threads to solicit the board's opinions and ideas. The product of the planning committee, the strategic plan committee's work is what we'll be talking about for the rest of this session. Brian will present the main goals and sub-goals of the plan and describe our current thoughts on its implementation. As I wrote in last year's President's Report, we'll remember 2023 and 2024 even more as years when the AAVSO pivoted. We took stock of where we stand today, looked at where we want to be in the future, and we pivoted. That is, we set out in a new direction. We are not abandoning the AAVSO that we have been. We honor what the AAVSO is and has been. But instead, we're trying to build a renewed AAVSO that will more fully achieve the goals that our founders defined back in 1919. Now, Brian is going to present his implementation details.
Thank you, Richard. All right. So I'm going to start by this conversation about the strategic plan by describing the people, the processes that we used, and some insights that we derived from the strategic plan, so you can understand why we're making some of the recommendations and decisions that we're putting forward to you today. So as Richard mentioned, we had 6 people that sat on the strategic planning committee, consisted of Richard and I myself, Bob Buckheim, David Cowell, Wal Cooney, and Peter Bilo. But I will note that we did not do this alone. We leveraged several previous strategic planning efforts, and back in Janet Mattey's days, these were called future studies, and a variety of other artifacts that we found both within the archives as well as within history books, and a variety of other interviews that we had. We reviewed all the material that came from the Harvard Community Action Partners findings, and we spoke with a lot of different key stakeholders, AAVSO members, and observers. Many of the times, if you received an email or a phone call from me and I just said, hey, what do you think about this? That was probably a result of the strategic planning efforts. And I would like to say thank you to all those that participated. And I will also let you know that today we are still soliciting feedback from you after we give the strategic plan. During lunch today, there will be a board member sitting at every single one of the tables that's in the lunch hall over here. And for those of you that are in person, you can identify them by the orange tag on their badge. And we want to hear your opinion. You can feel to remove the filters as far as you want, or you can tell us that you think it's great. Either way is perfectly fine. This type of feedback is highly important, so that we can ensure that we're driving the organization in the right direction. So as Richard mentioned, we use Bryson's strategic planning for public and nonprofit organizations, and this is an outline of the simple 10-step process that he has us follow. Every single one of these boxes here consists of usually 1 chapter worth of material, and there's a variety of different recommendations of ways that you can explore each one of these particular topics. And so it has a lot of things that you would traditionally see, and as Richard mentioned, so box number 2 is mandates analysis, so we find out what we're legally required to do. As a 501c3, in order to maintain our nonprofit status, we have to deliver something for the public benefit, for example. Under mission and values, we spend a lot of time exploring the purpose of the organization and who our stakeholders are. I had a gentleman ask me today, do we serve the professional astronomers or do we serve the amateur astronomers, right? It's not so clear cut. right? We serve both organizations as the AAVSO, right? You are our stakeholders and the professional astronomers are users of our data. And the other way around is that professional astronomers are our stakeholders and the information they convey to you is a product that they consume. And we sit in the middle as that primary interface. We did the traditional kind of SWOT-C analysis. So the box 4A above is opportunities and challenges, strengths and weaknesses, or threats that you could see down on the bottom, and brought those into a series of strategic issues. Richard alluded to this 2030 Who Do We Want to Be document where we proposed a whole bunch of different hypothetical scenarios. Richard wrote 5 different scenarios. I wrote 2 of them. Some of them were incredibly glowing and everything's coming up ponies. Other ones were very doomy and gloomy. And the board chimed in and we went from just 7 of these different scenarios to something like 20 different scenarios. And in some of them, actually in a lot of them, magic money appeared. And that is unfortunately something that you can't rely on. So from there, we took all of the issues, we looked at them, we examined them, looked at the data that came along with it, and picked the things that we, as a strategic planning committee, thought were the most important to our organization, and structured them into some strategy. And then the strategy turned into a series of actionable steps that we could take. And then basically everything from 7 to the right is more than less operational. But notice that everything from 5 over to 10 loops back to 5. And so that says at any point in this process, we can go back and reevaluate things and change what we believe are the strategic issues. So as Richard mentioned a moment ago, things are not set in concrete. We generated a variety of different work products, and here's a couple examples of things that we made. We had our charter, mandates analysis, stakeholder analysis, mission and values, external environment, internal environment, strategic issues, work plan, and that 2030 Who Do We Want to Be document, breathe. It turned up to more than 500 pages of different documents and a variety of different analyses and artifacts. So we spent a significant amount of time working on this project in order to deliver something that we believe is feasible. Some of the insights that we derived from this, so we have a lot of ideas about the science that we do. You heard me talking about sky surveys earlier during the member mission today. And it is our belief that surveys will probably deliver a more complete picture of the universe, simply because they're looking at lots of different objects with some kind of a regular cadence. However, sky surveys will have limitations and they'll fail to provide a comprehensive view of single objects. The AAVSO has traditionally operated in that second realm where we study objects in detail. And so we can continue to do that. And we can continue to deliver value to the professional community. In terms of projects, I mentioned that we did some experiments with Georgia State University's Center for High Angular Resolution Astronomy, or CHARA array. We found that some of the requests that were coming from the professionals were things that AAVSO would not traditionally do. We had some projects that were looking at non-variable stars. We had some projects that wanted radial velocity observations. There were some polarimetry requests which we just kind of brushed under the rug because we couldn't do them. And so there's a whole bunch of different things that we as an organization that serves to allow amateur astronomers to be able to contribute to science could actually undertake these things. But in order to do them, we have to provide training and tools and support to our observers or for our data analysts in order to do them. In terms of professional astronomers, we're not the only game in town anymore, and we haven't been for some period of time. And so they have a lot of different choices of where they can acquire their data to do their research. And it turns out they're very selective for what kind of data they used. I went back and I looked at a whole bunch of papers, and I found time and time again that data from our archives gets cherry-picked. There's a strong preference of professional astronomers for data that is photometrically transformed to a standard system and has a long time of, I'm going to say time series, but that's not what I mean, but a long series of observations, 5 or 6 years worth of data that are transformed into a standard photometric system. And if they can't find something that's transformed into a standard photometric system, they prefer a long series of data. And after that, they'll just cherry pick individual observers. One of the papers that I read, there were 88 observers that contributed data that could have potentially be used by the astronomers that were writing the paper. They picked 3. And so everybody else who was contributing data to that, in principle, wasn't producing stuff that was of significant enough value to be used in that publication. And then I mentioned earlier today, there's also a push for 1% absolute flux calibrated photometry. I was preparing a talk for this Space Telescope Flux Calibration workshop that was about 2 weeks ago. By the way, you should go watch those videos. There's a lot of really crazy stuff going on there. But in preparation for that talk, I found that an individual observer with a photodiode device, so like a PEP sensor, can deliver photometry that's good at a 0.1% level. So you say, okay, we're great. When we bring it in and we aggregate it, the PEP folks are actually pretty good. They have consistency kind of maybe at the 2 to 5% level. But if you look at CCD or CMOS observers, the best that we can do when we bring people's data in and aggregate it is kind of at the 10% level. And there's no way that we can reach 1%. So oh, by the way, the CCD CMOS observers are internally consistent to a 1% level. So there's something systematic occurring that's causing our data not to mesh together as a group. And so we need to look at that a little bit more and try to figure out what it is. And I had some ideas in that other talk, but I won't discuss them today. Now, insights about the people that make it possible to do this work. Again, I've been reading through the AAVSO's history book time and time again, especially finding Elizabeth in many of the chapters of that book. Here in the 1917 annual meeting, that was one of the first photos that we have. There's 35% of the people in that photo are women. And interestingly, down in the 2024 annual meeting, 35% of the people in that photo are also women. So we've always been a relatively diverse organization, and we've always promoted and been kind of like on the edge of gender and diversity inclusivity. One of the other things that we did is we conducted a survey at the Society for Astronomical Sciences workshop, and I believe some of you were there to hear that survey. It was nice because they're an organization that's very similar to us in many ways, but it's not necessarily us in other ways, right? It's a group that we want to engage with and we want to collaborate with a lot more. And what we learned from that is that the ways that amateurs engage in research is we found that perhaps if we take the statistics we got from that survey and extend it to AAVSO in general, there's probably a few hundred people within the AAVSO that want to actively collaborate with a researcher writing a paper. They want to be there involved in the data collection, the hypothesis formulation, the analysis. They want to be really involved and work directly with a professional astronomer. We also found that if we were to scale those statistics out, that there's probably a few thousand people that want to actively contribute to science, but not necessarily be involved directly in the researchers, be involved directly with the researchers. And then that's really most of what AAVSO does. That's about 80% of our population. People are out there collecting data, but they're not necessarily wanting to publish the papers, for example. And then an interesting observation is that we started looking at the Zooniverse because as you probably know, there's several eclipsing binary star classification programs, other variable star classification programs, and the Zooniverse in one of their programs has over 15,000 people that are participating. I mentioned this morning that the AAVSO, our total membership is about 1,400 people. So this is 10 times larger than us. And if we look at the Zooniverse in general, it turns out that there's actually millions of people who want to casually engage in science. And unfortunately, if you look at those three levels of categories, we only really have programming for one of them within the organization. And then we also found some insights about the way that we are perceived. So within the amateur community, outside of the AAVSO, right? So this is looking at like people that are doing astrophotography, people that are looking through telescopes, doing the Astronomical League Observing Awards. There's a strong perception. Well, first off, a lot of them don't know about us, which I found really quite surprising. I've had kind of a hit and miss thing. Like in my local club, everybody knows about the AAVSO because I give talks there quite often. But at other places, people, oh yeah, I think I heard about that because I read about it in Sky and Tell, but they really don't know what we do. And then if you ask them, hey, have you ever thought about doing variable star astronomy? They say, oh, that's really hard. I'll tell you what, I've tried doing astrophotography. That's hard. That's really, really hard. I can't focus my telescope that well. And so I think photometry is a lot easier, but there is a perception issue that's here that we need to deal with. In terms of professional astronomers, unfortunately, a lot of young researchers don't know about us. And I'll give kudos to Matt because you're bringing your students in and you're introducing them to us. So, that's a clear exception to the rule. But in general, a lot of people don't know about us. They know about sky surveys, but we're not there in the areas that we need to be in order to bring the AAVSO to their attention. A lot of our data products and services are basically unknown, even maybe to the community that we serve. We heard earlier this week, I don't remember the individual that was using it, but I asked, when I was sitting over there, I asked her, hey, have you thought about using VSX to eliminate the non-eclipsing binary variable stars? And she says, oh, I have never heard of it before, right? And she's here presenting at one of our conferences and she's never heard of VSX. That's not a terribly great sign. And then, with these things that sound really bad, I will like to temper that by saying the people that know about us, they really love us and they really support us and they cherish the mission of the organization. Now, you might notice that I didn't talk about any of our challenges, our weaknesses, or the threats. I want to keep this as a relatively happy talk. And if you have any questions about those things, I'd be happy to talk about them during the Q&A session. So now onto the strategic plan. So we drafted a new vision for the future of the AAVSO. This is a document, this is a statement of let's look down the road, maybe 5 to 10 years. What do we envision we could become? And in this situation, we think that the AAVSO could become the leading platform where people of all ages and backgrounds learn about and participate in scientific astronomy. That's not very different from what we already do, right? We provide people with the motivation to go out and do variable star observations. We have this conference to describe all of the benefits and the collaboration opportunities that exist. Unfortunately, the AAVSO is quite light on the education side. As Richard mentioned earlier, when Dr. Kafka came in to being the executive director, we had to implement some really strong cuts in our staff. And unfortunately, our educators, which numbered 3 at the time, we had a staff of 15, went to 0. And so we really lost that, headquarter managed education positions, which are really critical if you want to build training and education material that enable people to do the things that we do. Next up, we have a mission for the AAVSO. Our new mission will be to provide amateur astronomers and students with the opportunity to make real and direct contributions to astronomy. Again, that's not substantially different from what we already do, right? But we're going to build upon that, and we're going to broaden it out a little bit more than what we already do. The rest of this is just to describe how we do it, right? So we're going to do it by providing programs that students and amateur astronomers complete at their own pace. We're going to teach them how to make observations, how to analyze astronomical data, and then offer them the opportunity to participate in observing campaigns designed to produce peer-reviewed published papers, right? So there's a slight tweak upon what we do. We allow and we encourage people to go out and observe stars that they're interested in. Now we're implying that we're going to have a little bit more directed research that we're going to be encouraging. So our strategic goals for 2025 through 2029 are proposed as thus. We'd like to pivot to featuring high science value programs. We'd like to pivot to helping people become skilled observers. We want to cultivate a diverse membership. We want to assert our place within the astronomical community. And lastly, we want to continue to develop a strong technological base. And we're going to dive into each one of these in a little bit more detail. And before I do that, I forgot about this slide. So just so you understand, one of the reasons why Richard mentioned we failed to execute our last strategic plan because there wasn't something that was actionable behind it, right? We had these really lofty goals that we wanted to accomplish, but there was no step-by-step instructions for me as the incoming executive director to follow. Now we have this detailed plan on the left-hand side. I know you can't read it. It keeps going, by the way. It's about 3 times larger. We have the next 5 years worth of things planned out. So for each one of these strategic goals, we have 43 different projects and 397 different tasks that we'd like to complete to drive us to the state that we think that we could become that organization that people come to learn about and participate in scientific astronomy. This included a lot of comprehensive planning. So each one of these tasks is broken down into a series of projects. Each one of those projects is allocated against a resource. So if you've ever done like Gantt charts and project planning, right, this is that type of project management. We try to manage dependencies, although they're carefully sequenced. We used a spreadsheet rather than some really sophisticated project management software. And we also included estimates to account for AAVSO core activities as well as overhead so that we ensure that we're not trying to bite off more than we can chew. So that basically we're saying we believe this is actually achievable. So in terms of pivoting to featuring high science value programs, the actions that we're going to take over the next 5 years is we're going to dedicate 25% of our PhD staff time to conducting science with the members. This is going to start with a series of small research teams that are launched in 2025. In addition to Bert and myself doing this, Arnie Hendon also volunteered to run a research team as well. So we're now going to have 3 PhDs within AAVSO proper running some science programs. We're going to shift to project-driven observing and data analysis activities. So if you were all around in 2010 and you remember that Mike Simonson ran the Z campaign effort, it's going to be very similar to that, where we're going to work with the section leads, which we're going to start calling the section leads special interest groups instead. We're going to work with them collaboratively to develop and find interesting objects that they could observe and follow up on and lead various observing programs. And we're going to also create a data analysis project that's for the masses. This is a Zooniverse-style light curve modeling effort, so we can try to extend our reach outside of the normal series of people that we've been working with, which are mainly observers. We're going to try to approach the people that are interested in participating in astronomy in a much more casual way than what we have traditionally done. For our second goal of pivoting to help people become skilled observers, in 2026, we're going to hire a full-time educator. This person is going to take the lessons learned from the first year of us doing these small research teams and start answering questions that Bert and I and Arnie will have to be teaching people. A great example is, how do you read a research paper, right? You don't read it from top to bottom like a book, right? You read the abstract, you read the results, and then if you care a little bit more, you go and you read some of the other portions. That's not something that people that haven't done research before may know how to do, right? So there's a lot of simple things like that. How do you find papers on SIMBAD or ADS? How to use Google Scholar? You know, really fundamental things that exist there. We're also going to take and update our training materials for a modern learning environment. And that dovetails into the second goal, which is to develop some new asynchronous training material that exists on a modern platform. And we're trying to develop an alternative revenue stream here to help support that educator and get people off of reliance on the endowment. And so some of this material will be free and open to everybody, much like what we have today. Some of the material will be member-only benefits. So this will be a way that we can entice people to join our organization and support the efforts that we do. And then there may be some other activities that are available only as a paid for thing. So if it's some kind of hyper specialized course, so you know, like polarimetry analysis of some variable star or spectropolarimetry, right? That's not something that's going to appeal to a lot of people. And so we'll try to recuperate the investment that we put into building that material by making it a paid course. We're also going to provide additional feedback to observers with better data validation tools. And we're going to start by doing that first with AAVSpec. So for the last several years, AAVSpec has been moderated mostly by the staff within headquarters. And last year, Lauren taught Bert and I how to actually do spectral validation. And the tools that we're using right now are something that we can use internally as a staff, but it's not something that we can hand off to other people. But we're going to change that so that other people, one of the best ways to learn how to do good spectroscopy is to look at bad spectroscopy, right? And figure out how to spot these little issues that exist. And so we'll make it so that something that is presently taking about 40% of Lauren's time to do spectral validation becomes maybe 5% of her time, and she handles these edge cases, and we build up a strong team of spectroscopic data validators that are able to, judge and train and educate other people on how to make better spectroscopic data. So that's what we'll be doing in 2025. We also want to cultivate a very diverse membership. In terms of gender diversity, I don't know if you noticed, but with Chris terming out as secretary and Sarah resigning from her position this year, we only have Molly Wakeling as a female member on the board. And that's not really indicative of a modern society. And so the board is going to spend time to try to cultivate relationships with women that are out there within the broader world of astronomy and try to recruit them for leadership positions within the organization. The way that we've been trying to bring women and other people into our membership just isn't working the way that we thought it would in terms of leadership positions. For age diversity, we're going to define and administer some scholarship and grant programs. One of the best ways to catch people's attention is to offer them free money. And so we're going to run that, and that'll boost our name, because students will learn, oh, hey, there's a scholarship that's worth so many dollars, maybe I should apply for it, and we gain a little bit of notoriety through that. And in terms of both groups, we're going to be doing outreach to STEM groups and also demonstrating our inherent diversity that we know already exists within our organization by featuring blog posts on specific members that are contributing to our organization. In terms of asserting our place in the astronomical community, we're going to develop an application that captures our publication impact. I mentioned a while ago, I think it was earlier this morning, that the first time I looked through our papers to try to figure out that VSX accounts for 26% of our impact, I had to do that completely manually. So I skimmed 360 papers in the course of like 3 or 4 days. We're going to do that automatically. We're going to leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning to pull a paper off of ADS and have it be automatically classified. It'll be 80% correct maybe, but that's probably good enough for our use case. We're also going to identify and actively recruit professional astronomers to collaborate with us. We have thus far been an organization that we rely on people to come to us to ask us for data. We're going to reach out to them and say, hey, AAVSO could benefit your project in this particular way. Maybe you want to help, maybe you want to work with us. We're going to develop training materials and promote our new Smart Telescope application, which should be coming out and online at the beginning of 2025, and also create a special outreach-focused interest group that gives talks to local astronomy clubs. And finally, in terms of developing a strong technological base, one of the things that our program evaluation working group really struggled with was they were asking the question, how many people does a particular activity with an AAVSO benefit? And probably the best example that I saw was for the solar observing section, and I don't know where Chris is, but, oh, Chris was there, yeah. So we asked the solar, we looked to see, okay, well, who is downloading the solar data that we produce? And it turns out that we don't have anything that actually logs when somebody downloads that file. We can only give you an estimate within the last 10 days. So I asked the solar observing section, who's actually using our data? And they said, oh, we think it's these people. And eventually I got in touch with some colleagues of mine at LASP up in Boulder, and they had statistics that we could use. And it turns out that the solar average data is used by 350 researchers a month. That's a huge impact. And we didn't know about it, right? And so we're going to start adding metrics into our applications to make sure that we understand what our true impact to the scientific community is. And lastly, we're going to rewrite and upgrade a variety of legacy applications, including the variable star index. Right now, that's not really usable by professional astronomers like via AstroPi, the way that they would want to work with it. We need to create a new comparison star database that is designed for two-dimensional observations first. We need to rewrite our solar observing application because that's written in a completely different language. If you haven't heard me say it before, the AAVSO has 75 different applications, 26 databases written in 8 different programming languages, and we're $1 million a year organization. That's just insane. And lastly, we're going to develop an API to facilitate the use of our data products and services. And so that's an overview of what we're going to be doing over the next 5 years. And so we'll take some questions here in the meeting. And then in addition to that, I'd just like to remind everybody that there's going to be a AAVSO board member at every single table in the lunchroom during the lunch hour. And for those of you that are online, you're welcome to type in some questions now, or you can alternatively send your questions, comments, or concerns to aavso@aavso.org, and Richard and I will ensure that they get replied to. So thank you. So feel free to come up to the microphone.
Yes, I had to step out for a second, so I did miss part of your presentation. Have you thought about money going out in terms of like supporting amateur astronomy clubs and things like this that need, you know, the professionals want standardized photometry? A filter is going to cost you several $100s, you know, if you just want a V-band filter. Has there been consideration about helping support amateurs get that sort of small level equipment or funding, or even if students are publishing papers in the JAAVSO, to getting them to meetings and helping support at that level? Because I think that would be appreciated by a lot of the smaller astronomy clubs.
Yeah, indeed. So there are limitations. So right now, as Richard mentioned, we're basically tapped out in terms of our ability to spend any extra money, right? Like we'll have to get some form of a grant in order to support that activity. However, we do have some funds that are named after people. So there's the Maddie Fund, the Mayall Fund, and we recently received $15,000 in the name of Cecilia Payne Gaposchkin. And those funds could be potentially allocated. There's some question about what we could do, but we could potentially allocate them towards some form of a scholarship or grant program. I can't guarantee that we can because we need to consult with our attorney to figure out if the way that these funds were created is not entirely clear, and we need to ensure that we honor the intention of those funds and the money. When people made contributions, they were making contributions for a specific cause, and we can't just reallocate that money however we want. So we're going to try to see how we can establish those grant and scholarship programs. You heard me ask a question yesterday to the gentleman that was speaking about the X-ray telescope as to whether or not he thought that there was a way to get any funds for, say, polarization cameras. There might be some opportunities that exist in that area as well, but we'll have to explore them in more detail. Scott.
Morning, Brian. Kind of two questions. The first one is going to be very ill-formed. Going forward, you kind of talked about the programs of the AAVSO kind of having a broader applicability to professional researchers and things. I realize we are the American Association of Variable Star Observers. Has there been any thought to expanding the scope of the kind of observations that we could provide to include non-variable objects? That's the first question.
Okay, so I'll answer that one. So if you go back and the short answer is yes. If you look at our charter in 1911, it says that we are to exist for the study of variable stars and kindred subjects. So there is some additional area, like precedents, going clear back to 1911, that additional activities could be done. Now, AAVSO has classically been known as the variable star organization, but if you look at what we do stellar photometry, stellar spectroscopy, exoplanet photometry, and sunspot observations. And that leaves a little bit of leeway in terms of the activities that we perform. And Ken, Tom, and I were recently doing this non-variable star photometry program for some of my collaborators at the University of Michigan. So I think there's a lot of good opportunities for expanding the breadth of our services, but we have to do it in such of a way that we don't betray what our organization has been about for now 113 years.
Okay, and you'd also have to kind of overcome maybe the perception that if we expand the scope like that in a smart way, that we're not viewed just as a variable star organization.
Yeah, there's a variety of marketing activities that need to be performed to change that public perception, when we go in that direction. I did test this I tested that exact thing that I said to you a moment ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
The stellar photometry, stellar spectroscopy, et cetera. I tested that at the flux calibration workshop, and there were a couple guys in the back of the room that started clapping, professional astronomers, right? They recognize that we do a lot more in terms of science.
Okay, the second question, and it would be time permitting, and I'll ask it, I'm going to walk away, is could you talk a little bit about the most significant strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that you considered in forming your strategic plan?
Okay, yeah. So I'll do a weakness, a challenge, and a threat. So in terms of our weakness, we approached a funding agency several years ago about implementing some changes to some of our software, and we had a very nice conversation with them, had all of the appropriate things in place that we could make a relatively large ask. And what we ended up doing was asking for something that was basically an operational need. Whereas when we met with the funder, time and time again, they said, we want some big idea. We fund the greatest things in the in the world, right? And when we submitted the proposal to them, they came back and they gave us a $50,000 check, and we walked away and we were really happy, right? But I learned about this donation that we had received shortly after I became the director, and I said, hey, what are the reporting requirements for this grant? And the answer was there are no reporting requirements. This isn't a grant. And I asked myself, what did the funder communicate to us, right? They didn't give us a grant, and they just gave us a check. So what they really told us was, go away. And so we wondered what was happening, and we eventually found out. The grantor that we were interacting with felt that we were an organization that didn't have a plan, that we didn't have a clear idea of where we wanted to go into the future. Now we do, right? We can go back to them and tell them that we want to become this organization in the future, and we have an executable way of doing it, but we need some extra money to help us out, and we can grow it. So that problem is solved. So that's a weakness. In terms of a challenge, it's going to be another money thing. So if you look at current NSF funding statistics, the odds of winning a grant from the National Science Foundation within astronomy is 15%. So let's just run with this. That implies that you need to submit, say, 5 to 6 proposals kind of on average in order to win one. But the problem is that it's not 5 to 6 proposals. It's not 5 to 6 good proposals. It's 5 to 6 excellent proposals, because you are competing against the brightest minds in America. And that's really difficult to do. And this year, Bert and I have submitted 8. We're 0 for 8. That's a huge challenge. And we recognize that this is a problem. What we've done to solve this is we have Whitney Armenter now that is reading our grants ahead of time to make sure that she used to be an actual grantor as opposed to a grantee. She knows what these organizations are looking for in terms of the language that's expressed inside of those grants. And in addition to that, we're having our PhDs on the board do a red team analysis of our grants when we write them in advance, and they tell us this isn't good, you need to rewrite this thing. And we follow their feedback to try to make a much more responsive and better proposal. We have our first proposal going into the NSF that's done this process on the 15th of this coming month. So we'll see if it works, right? And the last one, so that was our weakness. Sorry, that was our challenge. The last one is a threat. When I first became the executive director, I had a series of conversations with board members and a lot of other people. By the way, thank you. That was really useful to find out what the organization really is. And I was talking with Antonella Nota, and if you don't know her, she was the former deputy director for the European Space Agency here in the United States. She told me something that I didn't fully understand at the time, and she said, Brian, people are waiting for you to fail. And I had a little bit longer of a conversation to follow up with her. And I learned that there are commercial companies that see citizen science as another way to fund their agency, right? Most of the time, citizen science, we think of it as something that nonprofit organizations do, but now we have commercial companies that are soliciting grants and they're winning them. I won't name them, but they're doing a really good job. And so now, not only are we competing against other nonprofit organizations for grant funding, but we're also competing against for-profit companies for grant funding, and they are building products that are fully integrated, so they become an almost closed ecosystem where we may not necessarily be able to penetrate unless we establish some kind of a collaborative relationship. And there's several other examples of challenges and weaknesses and threats that sit within here, but those are some of the primary ones that I think impacted a lot of our decision-making process in crafting the strategic plan.
And I would like to point out that one of the key time consumers actually in creating this strategic plan was finding out the facts. Okay, everybody has a vision of what AAVSO has been. We went back and got the facts. We analyzed, we studied, we took the surveys that we'd gotten from CAP, some telephone inquiries that Elizabeth had done, told us why people stayed in the organization and why people left. So we weren't going like, oh, I think that's what happens. We knew very often what's going on. And the kind of things that Brian's talked about in talking to the various agencies and groups, 15% chance if you make a really great proposal. That means it's hard to find money.
Yeah. So, Rick.
So in keeping with a shift in mission, as you've described, I'm curious about whether the strategic planning group considered the name.
Oh, yeah.
For
yeah.
instance,
So this is one of those other great things about being able to dig through the archives. The particular question of American Association of Variable Star Observers has been brought up a whole bunch of times, especially in regards to the American portion. You know, the idea is that it excludes other organizations, other countries. The answer that we received from our attorney is that it's logistically difficult to do that name change, and you probably shouldn't do it. And instead, notice that none of my slides have said American Association of Variable Star Observers. They say AAVSO. We're known as AAVSO. And so we can, brand ourselves as those letters.
So you're saying that legally, in terms of the charter, that a name change is completely off the books?
It introduces a lot of complications that we may not wish to incur at this present time.
Yeah, you can use the logo on the top of the papers in all of your discussions. But somewhere in the thing, it's going to say the name of the organization is such and such, so that you have legally required or legally fulfilled your obligation to give your name and what you are.
Okay.
This happens with IBM. I mean, you look at an IBM document and you always find out that it's International Business Machines somewhere.
Yep. Matt.
So pardon the pun here, but I want to set the table for a vigorous and useful discussion over lunch by reminding people of something that was in the program, but you may or may not have noticed, which is that we're proposing to hold the annual meeting online next year. And us on the board have been involved in that decision and have some of the background and motivation. And one of the reasons we'll be seated throughout the room is to hear from you about what it would take to make that sort of endeavor useful. The intent is to do this as a one-time practice and see how it goes. So the groundwork is being laid for a potential in-person 2026 meeting in case it doesn't go well. But it's one of those things I just wanted to get it out in the open and invite your feedback.
Yep. Thanks, Matt. All right. So how about we have Ken, since you were standing up at the mic, and it's 12:30, so we're already 30 minutes into the lunch hour, and I don't want a hangry audience. Otherwise, somebody will go to the hardware store and get pitchforks and tiki torches. Okay. Maybe Ken, are you okay with that?
Sure.
Okay. Yep.
One is from Richard Wagner. How can we access the strategic plan and its background development documents?
So a lot of those documents describe a variety of things, which the board you probably saw, they all said confidential on the top and bottom of them. So we haven't attempted to scrub them. Actually, if you look at most of our corporate records, for example, like our meeting minutes, we don't release them. The board, transitioning from a council over to a board, we're trying to take steps to move to a more open organization, like having this conversation rather than just dictating these changes. But most of those documents will be available only for the board for some period of time.
Perhaps if your presentation can be made available as it stands, that would be
So like
really
this video and this conversation will be posted up to YouTube.
Okay. The other one from Jay Miller, he's just raising 2 points in terms of getting us out there. How about a monthly column in Astronomy and Sky and Tel discussing the AAVSO and things to observe and how to observe?
Yeah, we've tried to do that type of column stuff in the past. Actually, Stella hired 2 different writers that were attempting to place things in astronomy-related magazines on a regular basis, and unfortunately, most of them weren't picked up. Now, if we can find somebody who really likes writing and can write something like that's really strong, we can pitch it to Astronomy and Sky and Tel and see if they like it. But we're not guaranteed to get space in these publications simply because of who we are.
His other.
Oh yeah, we have an in with the editor at the Reflector.
Okay.
Oh yeah, Diana. Yeah, the observing editor. Yeah,
great.
she's good. Yep. Oh yeah, so Tom said in the background that there's a new editor at the Sky and Telescope.
His other point is just it's a great thing. He's a volunteer at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, and they're upgrading the museum, and he's been bugging them to include the contributions of amateurs, and they plan on doing that. And although he doesn't know at what level, he said that part won't be done for 2 years, but we should definitely connect with them.
Yeah,
with Jay and with them to.
Yeah, John, certainly put us in touch. I think that's something that we can do, and we can certainly develop a good material and a good display, because we have lots of really interesting work that's being done by amateurs that's important to the broader scientific community. So go ahead, Ken.
Okay. Coming back from the reception on Friday night, I happened to walk by Mike Wiles. And he said something to me, or asked me a question. What do you think about the fact that we're not having an annual meeting in person next year? And frankly, my mouth opened. I guess literally I was beside myself. I just could not conceive of something. And I'd like to give you a few ideas of why. This is perhaps a rant. It's more meant to be a plea. I have used the word insurrection at times to describe it, but in any case, I've written myself a few notes this morning, so close to the mic. Okay. What are meetings for? We're here at a meeting right now. Why are we here? I have a few ideas about that. First is a personal opinion. In-person meetings are key to the life of this organization. An opinion, I think shared by a few other people in the audience. A few observations that I've developed over the last 15 years of coming to every meeting. If not for meetings like this, avoiding crying is probably a little difficult for me here, but I would not know Richard Sable. I would not know Pierre. I would not have studied our Lyra stars, worked with Pierre on 2 papers that are in the journal. I would not have had them to my house for dinner. I would have not have been in Pierre's house in Belgium. If not for this meeting, I wouldn't have met Gordon Myers. I wouldn't have helped him with TG, Transform Generator, which is an excellent way of getting your transformation coefficients. If not for meetings like this, I would not have met Mike Simonson. I would not know about choice courses. I knew this was going to get difficult. And I would not have had my arm twisted into running the VFOT course for the last 10 plus years. I will be able to continue doing that, I hope, for a few more years. If not for meetings like this, I would not have met Arnie. I would have not taken the CCD school. I would not have learned the photometry that I understand now and I'm able to teach to other people. I would not have involved myself with AAVSO with Arnie and George and helped other members use our telescopes and get images because they don't own a telescope themselves, and to help them learn more about photometry. So in my personal opinion, my humble opinion, these meetings are the lifeblood of this organization. If not for these meetings, I personally believe there will be no AAVSO. So I request, implore, beg, if that's what it takes, that the board of directors, many of them are sitting here in front of me, reconsider their decision not to have an in-person meeting even as early as next year. I think you all are smart people. I voted for you to become members of the board. I hope you can come up with alternatives to, in my mind, what is a draconian choice of having no in-person meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And I'd actually like us to head off to lunch right now, unless it's really
straw
quick.
poll. Can we get a straw poll of who wants the in-person meeting and who wants not an in-person meeting? Okay.
Yes, group photo up here at the front, please. So thank you very much, and we'll have a board member at each table.
I'd just point out that a straw poll is only relevant if it includes all of the members who are not here in this room and not visible.